From Mamma Mia, welcome to The Spill, your daily pop culture fix. I'm Ksenia Lukic.
And I'm Laura Brodnick.
And on today's show, we are going to be unpacking Jennifer Aniston's Vanity Fair piece. And there's a couple of things in there that we didn't know, some we did, a few stories to tell, and we're just going to go really, really deep.
Yes, so we're going to get into that. But coming up first, I'm sorry to make a personal announcement, but my boyfriend has stepped out with another woman.
I know, we actually spoke about this the other week on the podcast, talking about how is he single, and Joshua Jackson is doesn't look like he's single
He doesn't
anymore.
look like he's single, which is stressful for me. And when I say boyfriend, he's unaware of my existence. And look, it is one of the longest relationships I've ever had. I've been in love with that man since I was about 12 years old. Joshua Jackson, yes, has been making a lot of headlines recently because he's filming a new project with Katie Holmes, his Dawson's Creek co-star and also ex-lover, for about 6 months when they were 18. So, but you know, a relationship's a relationship. And just yesterday, he was photographed out and about in the town with Simone Ashley from Bridgerton.
Now, there was no hand-holding or massive PDA or anything, but the rumour mill is swirling.
I can't stress enough how much these were paparazzi photos, so we shouldn't have looked at them, but we're trash, so we did. And I can tell that that had to be said. We're trash. We looked at the photos. You can too, I guess. They're out in the world. We won't repost them. But I can tell you zoomed in. I did too. There was no hand-holding that I could see, but there was hand grazing, which is almost more intimate when you're trying to have a secret relationship.
When you first start dating someone, like a handhold is, again, I don't even know why I try and tune in on new relationships because I've got no bloody idea anymore.
But also, this isn't a normal new relationship because what you would do in a new relationship if it's just two normal people walking down the street is vastly different than if you were two superstars with a high profile and you're walking down a paparazzi hotspot area, which is where they were. So I don't think the hand holding is, it's actually smart of them not to hold hands, but their heads are quite together. They're laughing together. Now, they could just be good friends. They could have been talking about a project that they have coming up together. He's obviously filming Katie Holmes' new project, but his TV show has just been cancelled. She's got a lot of things on the horizon, potentially they're co-stars. But the vibe was more lovers.
It felt like, if I could read energy, the energy felt intimate.
Well, what I know about Joshua Jackson, my lover of many years, is that he loves a bit of PDA and he doesn't mind being photographed with the women he's obsessed with. He was with Diane Kruger, who is my biggest nemesis because I only have two crushes, Norman Reedus and Joshua Jackson, and they're her two long-term love interests.
Yeah.
It's unfair for one woman to that's bad for feminism is what I'm going to say on that. But he was photographed a lot with her very intense PDA. They were together for 10 years. And then he and Jodie Turner-Smith, the mother of his daughter, very kind of not I guess they walked red carpets together, but they also were very, PDA. And then he and Lupita Nyong'o, those photos of them on the beach making out, again, paparazzi photos, I'm trash, was so intimate and sexy. I almost felt like I felt like I was invading their privacy by looking at them.
But you were zooming.
I was zooming in, and I was like, you know what? If it can't be me, at least it's Lupita.
I think that we were talking about this a little bit earlier. It's is there an issue with the 17-year age gap? Joshua Jackson's 47 and Simone is 30.
She's only turned 30, I think. Yeah. So obviously he is a creepy old man and he's in Hollywood, so that fits the vibe.
Just stop.
17 years.
I know it's a long time, but in Hollywood it's nothing.
I know. Well, here's the other thing too is
if she was 20, I'd have more of an issue with it. We've spoken about this before. I think the age difference matters less the older the youngest person is. Does that make sense?
No. I'm picking what you're putting down. Exactly. So much worse if it's a 20-year-old and a 40-year-old because those are completely different people. At least in your 30s, you're getting to be a proper adult. I don't think you become an adult till 35 is my hot take.
Oh.
And so, I know, we're so young.
I feel that.
Is when you become a proper adult. Up until then, you're just figuring stuff out. So if you're in the 30s, at least you know what's going on.
And there's also the whole brain development thing. Your brain doesn't fully develop as a woman until you're 25 and blah, 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 blah. So, and Simone Ashley is a beautiful, intelligent woman, a very talented woman. Joshua Jackson is the same. Wish them all the best. Laura might might be creating some voodoo dolls.
Well, look, I'm just saying, at least I just hope that she's a fan, because I was never upset at Jodie Turner-Smith marrying him because she was a diehard Dawson's Creek fan. So I was like, at least one of us got in there if it wasn't going to be, the rest of us. I don't know Simone Ashley personally. I hope she had the Dawson's Creek box set growing up. I don't know. I will also just say one little note. I hate to say this about Joshua Jackson because, as previously discussed, I am in love with him. But he does sometimes love a little public PDA when he's a little bit in trouble in other areas. And I'll just say he's in a bit of an ugly custody battle right now. And sometimes when there's a bad story about him, he does like to do little PDA walk.
I do feel like, even though we know he's had this custody battle, it's been pretty ugly, but the press around him and Katie Holmes working together was very, very positive. So,
the man's on an upward positive momentum at the moment. Like, he's actually, again, off the back of his TV show Dr. Odyssey being cancelled, he's actually in a better place than he has been in years professionally. And a lot of it is to do with the women he's surrounding himself with.
I really hate how men just keep getting better looking.
He's just getting hotter. I mean, hotter and hotter and hotter.
Pisses me off.
Anyway, good job, Simone Ashley. At least one fan got in there.
The latest Vanity Fair cover star is Miss Jennifer Aniston, looking absolutely stunning. And as we all know, when Vanity Fair do a cover, they do a nice, big, in-depth, juicy profile piece, and there have been some findings from it. So the piece was written by Vanity Fair writer Julie Miller, and there's definitely a couple of things in there that, we've sort of seen before, but there's some really interesting pieces, I think. One of the ones that struck me quite early on in the piece, I kind of want to go from start to finish because that's how my brain works. Quite early on in the piece, she was talking about how she doesn't quite have enough room for a memoir, but she will write a memoir one day, which I actually found quite interesting.
Yeah, also, I was like, good deflection, because obviously you could fill 10 memoirs, but she's just trying to kind of be like, oh, one day when I get around to it. Also, even though she's 56, she does talk about being like in the prime of her career and the start of it. And so she's kind of like, oh, no. Like when I'm at my peak now. And I do love that energy for her.
I like that too. And there was a lot of, the very calm, nature, and she's wearing jade bracelets and skinny jeans and flip-flops.
Yeah.
It was all about like rose quartz and spirituality.
Oh, yes, the things on her coffee table. Actually, that was the bit that struck me first, was the intro, which kind of sets up everything we're going to learn about Jennifer Aniston in this profile. And this is when I read it, I knew this was written by Julie Miller because she is just like the queen of profiles, where she talks about getting to Jennifer Aniston's sanctuary. And she's like, you climb up, up, up into the hills of Los Angeles, past mansions shielded by millions of dollars. Then she talks about like an alleged stalker trying to get into her property and having a police cruiser outside Jennifer Aniston's house 24/7, but then talking, as you're saying, like this serene, calm, beautiful nature. And I was like, that is the best description of Jennifer Aniston's life I've ever read. Like stalker, police cruiser, hectic, calm, cream, rose quartz, like the two things existing together.
Well, I feel like if you live a life like that, you're going to kind of have to do it. And Julie also talks about sort of the last big story that Jennifer Aniston did with Vanity Fair back in 2005, just after her divorce from Brad Pitt. And, she talks about how that was like a really tumultuous time for her, quite traumatic for her, really difficult to kind of manage the media. And, she said back in 2005, journalism felt more like a sport. And I think that is definitely true. I think journalism still is in a sense, but particularly in those early 2000s, it really was all about getting tabloid pictures, the gossip. Like there was a little bit less emphasis on the privacy of celebrities. And she talks about how, everyone says that I signed up for this, but I didn't. I was 18. I had no idea where this was going to take me. And one of the things that I do think is interesting is how, she has been very guarded. And we spoke about this with sort of Sydney Sweeney earlier this week. She said, how are they going to misinterpret my words or take something out of context?
Yeah.
And I think that that's really interesting because, she's been in the industry for, 30 years now, and she has now learnt to be guarded, and she has to be.
Yeah.
One of the bits that really did sort of seem to stick out a lot was her relationship with her Friends co-star Matthew Perry and his sort of final moments. As we know, Matthew Perry died of a ketamine overdose and had struggled with addiction for many, many years, most notably on Friends. You can see it through the seasons. You see his body change quite substantially from, and he talks about it in his biography about that being in the grips of that addiction. And, you know, Jen sort of, it's an interesting thing. And I think that a lot of friends and family of addicts will have this same sentiment. It's like, I'm really sad that he's gone, but I'm glad that he's at peace now, which I think is a very relatable thing for people to say. And Matthew Perry said in his book, you know, Jen was the one that always reached out. Jen always checked in on me and made sure that I was okay. So I think the loss of that, it's not like she's happy to have lost him, but I think she's just not waiting for that phone call anymore. It's obviously of a bit of relief to her.
Yeah, it's interesting because she obviously spoke about Matthew Perry before. I did feel really bad for her after his death. I mean, for all of them, but I think out of all the Friends stars, she's obviously got the biggest glare of fame around her. And she was the one who was out on red carpets and events because that was her job at the time. And you'd have these reporters leaning across red carpets, which I know is their job, and shouting out to her, like, what do you think of Matthew Perry's death? And she'd have to be like, shout something back. And I'm just like, that's just such an intense way to talk about grief and like a shouting across a red carpet. It's interesting the headlines that have come from this because I don't know which ones you've seen, but the headlines have obviously been like any mention of Brad Pitt, Gwyneth Paltrow, Matthew Perry. So it's been all the celebrity names in here. But what I liked is it gave this kind of look into her life that hasn't made the headlines and no one's really talking about and never gets mentioned, of this like life she has built for herself. Like when they're talking about the Sunday dinners and they're talking about like all of her famous friends, but not even that they're famous friends. It's just like, you know, Jason Bateman and stuff coming over with like their families and their friends. And it's like every Sunday night, Jennifer Aniston has a whole house full of people for this Sunday dinner, and some of them are saying like their kids see her as like a second mother and
I
how
loved that bit.
Yeah, and just all this kind of stuff about it. And I was like, it's so interesting how like everyone will read this and they'll see the Brad Pitt headlines and they'll think like, oh, you know, the whole classic, like poor Jennifer Aniston, like jilted by Brad Pitt, divorced from Justin Theroux, didn't talk about her hypnosis boyfriend. It was the one question she turned down, which was interesting. It was like, I'm not talking about that. And I was like, what you're seeing from the headlines and what I'm reading from this profile are two starkly different things, because what I'm seeing is a woman who has a life that most people dream of, and not because of the money and the fame, but because she has this huge community of people that flock around her. Like, isn't that the dream?
I think so. And there's and I think this is why I would definitely encourage, when you see that there are big profile pieces written, read the profile itself. Don't just read those headlines, because you will get so much more out of it. And, you know, we talk about the fluff in between, but sometimes it's entertaining. The bit that I really love that I haven't seen that many people talk about, obviously she has a very close relationship with Sandra Bullock and Jason Bateman. There's a lot of that about it in the profile, and both Sandra and Jason make comments within the profile. And, you know, the fact that Jason Bateman's daughter borrows Jen Aniston's like old clothes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can you imagine? And because Jason Bateman is obviously very famous himself, his daughter doesn't really see Jennifer Aniston as Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah.
She sees her as, you know, like an aunt. But can you imagine having access to Jennifer Aniston's like,
I know.
millennial wardrobe?
I know. I mean, having, that level of access and being like, Jennifer's the first one to like message our kids about big moments. She's the one they go to about boyfriend trouble and like life advice. It's so interesting. It's the first time I don't get envious of celebrities, because I think like it's so easy, especially in this job, to see through the glitz and glamour to like the trauma. So I very rarely get jealous of Jennifer Aniston. But reading about her life and how people see her, I was like, I am jealous of that. Like it's like so weird how like the poor Jen narrative is actually like she's an incredibly lucky person.
I hate the poor Jen narrative. I also hate and I think this is again a lot of the way that journalism was in the sort of late 2000s about like her being childless and she couldn't fall pregnant. Like, we know now, particularly millennial women are choosing to not have children and having beautiful, fulfilled, happy lives where they can still be surrounded by family, a chosen family. Like, I think that shifting that narrative from poor Jen to I'm actually so freaking jealous because that looks incredible.
And that's the kind of thing when she's talking about the children, the headline and stuff in this Vanity Fair piece, because she has talked, since that whole Brad Pitt situation that she was going through IVF and she was trying everything and they couldn't have kids. But you can kind of almost see the way she's talking in this piece when she's talking about like the tabloid frenzy and all these things, that this is a woman who just hates media so much. And not even just like when some celebrities talk about that side of their jobs, that what they're referring to as paparazzi, but she's talking about like media paparazzi all in like one thing. And her hatred of them runs so deep that it's like it kind of tinges everything that she says.
I think when you grow up in that, I don't imagine you would be able to escape that feeling.
Yeah.
Like it is probably one of the things that we hear the most from celebrities about that sort of dark side of fame, about not being able to just walk down the street and not being able to cry in public and not being without someone creating some sort of narrative around it. Like I have a lot of empathy for that. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, they're super rich, they're fine. Like, it's easier to cry in a Bentley than it is in a Toyota, but like...
And I do wonder when people are like, oh, what does she mean she doesn't know what fame would do to her? And I was like, well, there is a world in which like she wanted to be a working actress. She grew up with her father being a working actor on a huge soap opera and kind of seeing him being an actor and working in that industry. But like paparazzi never followed her dad. They never followed her family. I don't even think they really reported on her parents' breakup, or if they did, it was like a tiny minuscule mention. All of the tabloid stuff about her family, which blew up for years. That's the thing. It's not just the Brad Pitt stuff. Like the tabloid stuff attached itself to her before Brad Pitt because, she had that huge falling out with her mother, and then her father like took a side and he was really famous like in a different demographic, and then her mother did all these tell-all magazine pieces, and then Jennifer Aniston came out and was like, please stop, and then her mum wrote a book about her, and then she looked after her mum before her death, and her mum wasn't at her wedding but her dad was. Like that
and also let's remember the nature of media in the 90s versus the nature of the media 2000s and the nature of the media now. We're talking about the rise of the internet. We're talking about the rise of paparazzi. I mean, we're sitting here on a podcast doing a half an hour episode talking about this woman and her life because that is the way that media and the way that we communicate with each other has changed. I do think it's slightly better than it was in those early 2000s where it was so salacious and it was let's get the ugliest, worst possible moment. And Brad and Jen's divorce happened right smack bang in the middle of the height of that.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that is what people have really latched onto.
And look, there is stuff to latch onto because, again, as much as I'm talking about the beautiful friendship dinners and that sort of stuff, I did like the little tidbit in there about her and Gwyneth Paltrow because it just connected dots in my head that I knew but I hadn't put the information together. So obviously she and Gwyneth Paltrow are still really good friends. She even says they swap a lot of info about doctors. They talk more about doctors and like beauty procedures than men, which I 100% believe is true for them. But I didn't kind of connect the dots that when Gwyneth Paltrow and Brad were engaged, Jen Aniston was in their circle. So she went to their engagement party.
I know. She was like, ironically, I went to the engagement party. And then a year later, so I did the math on it. So a year later, so 97 is when they got engaged. Brad and Jen started dating in 98. So it was a year after this engagement party that she went to. Scandalous.
Which is, okay, I'm not saying anything untoward happened. Or, like, I don't think that at all. But I do think their How We Met story, a shadow has been cast on it because Jen and Brad have always said their managers set them up, which maybe it did. Maybe their managers were like, they facilitated it because they can't be sliding into DMs back in the day. But to me, that always made it sound like they were kind of strangers in the industry who didn't know each other and had their managers set them up. It's so different having your manager set you up with your friend's ex-fiance who's in your friendship circle.
But I feel like we again, Gwyneth said that she's the one that sort of broke the engagement off. So maybe then she was like,
no, I think it's all fine.
Girl, you can have him.
I just think it's all fine. I just also think that that has changed the story of how Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston met. And no one is picking up on that as the red hot gossip. They're picking up on the fact that they're like, did you and Gwyneth ever talk about Brad? And she's like, of course, we're girls. But they're probably like, he's not that interesting at the moment. They're probably just like, oh, Jesus Christ, did you see him, the outfit he was wearing?
I know. I feel like there's
like, did you see the balloon pants?
It's just like not as much there anymore. And obviously there's been some problematic things about Brad Pitt that have happened in the last few years. But you said something really, really interesting this morning that struck me. And, after seeing all of the headlines, the different places picking up on the articles, you know, all this brand new information. And you said something that like was you're very intuitive, Laura Brodnick.
I just put too much thought into these things. Yeah, I guess the thing is, like, I saw the photos come out of Jennifer Aniston and that she had done this big profile, and I just find her an endlessly interesting woman. So I was really excited. I clicked into it. I read the whole thing, and I think, you know, you can tell I was a fan of the profile. But after reading the stories about what her home looked like and how her friends treat her and little tidbits about, like, the morning show and all these sort of things, I got to the end of the article and I was like, it's so interesting how this feels like this woman gave this big, open, honest profile. But she's Jennifer Aniston, and I think it's because she's been famous for so long. Jennifer Aniston is so good at making you feel like when you're reading her words or she's in an interview, making you feel like she's giving you all this honest information and she's being really warm and open. But when you actually look at it in like the stark words on a page, she doesn't give anything away. Like, she's so media trained and she has such a hatred of the media and the public's perception of her that she's actually the most guarded celebrity, I think. But she comes off as the most open.
But that is the magic. And that is the magic of her in terms of the way that she presents herself to the world. And we can say that in stark contrast to the way the Sydney Sweeney article was received. When Sydney Sweeney was talked about being very guarded and didn't want to answer questions because she didn't want things to be misconstrued, which let's not forget, Jen Aniston just said the exact same thing in an article 2 days later. Yet we have a feeling of warmth and this genuine nature and kindness oozing from it, even though it is still incredibly guarded. And that's actually an incredible skill to have. And I think that just goes to show her experience and the fact that she's been in the industry for so long.
Yeah, exactly. She knows how to like breadcrumb a little bit, because it also feels like she talked about Brad Pitt slightly in the article, because she was talking about the last time that she did a big sit down with Vanity Fair and they came to her home, and it was in the midst of, she calls it like the love triangle, the separation. So like the whole like Brad Pitt leaving her for Angelina Jolie and everything that happened after that. And it sounds like she's giving you this big kind of exclusive look. But if you also look back at what she said about Brad Pitt over the years, she said like maybe 5 sentences over like 20 years, but they've all been so like kind of stark that they stick in your mind of like how she talks about him. Like, do you remember when like that whole thing came out, like after their divorce was finalized, and even kind of before that? I don't know how across their breakup you are. It's weirdly one of those things I know a lot about. It was like all encompassing at the time. How like Jen and Brad were pictured like out on a walk together. Like everyone thought their marriage was over, and they went on vacation. They went on a walk. They purposely left the compound they were in to walk in front of the cameras. And then 2 days later, after they had shown the world, like, look, we're together, they put out their whole statement together that they were divorcing. And then Brad and Ange were like, they very clearly set up paparazzi shots of the two of them to announce their relationship. But not long after that, there'd been all these talks that Brad Pitt had left Jennifer Aniston because she couldn't have a child.
Yeah.
And he didn't do anything to dispel that at the time. I still don't think he ever has addressed that. But he did do this big glossy magazine shoot with Angelina Jolie where the whole idea was like...
Was he lying in a pool with a suit on?
Yeah.
That is like the best, like the most classic male magazine spread trope is man in suit floating in water.
Exactly.
For no apparent reason.
And they had stunt children, fake children being like playing like their children on this set. It was like this, it was meant to be like the traditional American family, like the perfect American family featuring Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, and the beautiful life they're creating. So that came out, and Jennifer Aniston said like he has a sensitivity chip missing, which was just really one of the worst things you can say about someone that you were married to. And over the years, like they kind of, I don't know, traded little barbs back and forth. Like, do you remember, it's okay if you don't because maybe you have a life, when he said that one of the reasons he got divorced from Jennifer Aniston is because he was looking for an interesting movie role, and he realized that he wanted an interesting movie role because he wasn't living an interesting life because he was married to Jennifer Aniston.
No, I don't remember that. And it's not because I don't have a life. It's because you have an incredible memory.
Well, I wish I didn't remember that because it's like one of the cruelest things you could
so
say.
Cruel.
And later on, he's like, oh, no, the media spun that. I'm like, no, sir, you said it.
You said it. Like, you can't, like, we're not on Love Island here where we chop change and Married at First Sight. Like, you said it. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Don't try and tiptoe. Don't try and back out now, mate.
I know, exactly. Him trying to say, I'm sorry. It's like someone saying, I'm sorry you were upset. Instead of, I'm sorry I upset you. Anyway, I don't mean to drop every terrible thing Brad Pitt's ever done because we have already done episodes about that. But it did make me think as she's mentioned like Brad Pitt a little bit in this profile, and there's this whole huge sordid kind of story about them. And even in this profile, people are still looking for almost like a sign that they're still friendly or a sign there's a reconciliation. We do know they're friendly now, which I hate for her.
Like, it's also, she just must be so exhausted by it. We're fascinated by it because it was such a big part of our lives. But can you imagine still being asked about an ex from 20 years ago?
No, and that's why I wonder why she's been so public about the fact that she's friendly with him again. And I also, she hasn't done it since a lot of this stuff has come out about him potentially being, like, allegedly being really abusive to Angelina Jolie and the kids and all that stuff. So she hasn't said too much since all that came out. So maybe she's hedging her bets a bit now. But, like, they had that. It was iconic meeting at the SAG Awards when he grabbed her arm backstage and like caressed her arm. And then they were on a Zoom together where they did the whole, hey, Pitt, hey, Aniston. Yeah, no. Then he went to her 50th birthday. Unnecessary. There was lots of other fabulous people there. Katy Perry and Kate Hudson got in a fight about it afterwards, about who posted photos. Plenty of things happening without Brad Pitt being involved. And then recently they've been like spotted at events together and calling each other buddy.
I mean, look, maybe then like water under the bridge. Like, you can be a dick to someone. You can have, say terrible things about someone and forgive them. And I think honestly, maintaining that level of like hatred for someone or that animosity towards someone is so much heavier on yourself than it is on them, right?
No, I definitely get that.
You've got to get to a point, particularly at 57, and I think anyone who's older, you'll talk to them and it's like, I don't have room or space in my soul for that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah, it's not even so, like, I definitely understand why she personally, like, it's easier to forgive him. For all we know, she's also forgiven Angelina Jolie, who is probably the more, like, less culpable person in this situation. It's more so that it's kind of been so public, but also maybe that is part of her plan, because as much as she hates media and she hates paparazzi and she hates people talking about her, she has to control it to a sense. And it's true that the narrative of like poor Jen Aniston slightly altered once people thought she and Brad were friends, because she didn't seem as publicly as the jilted woman.
Well, and not as publicly humiliated, because that is what happened when Brad stepped out with Angelina. It was just really humiliating for her. And I can understand that. But now, she's taken her power back. She's talking about the morning show. Excellent show. Her friendship with Reese Witherspoon, talking about how like that relationship between the two women is about a copacetic relationship rather than something that is at odds with each other, which I think is really nice. Overall, would recommend.
Yes, would recommend. We took 30 minutes to say that. Great profile.
Great profile. Maybe not necessarily anything particularly new, but Jennifer Aniston is a wizard with the media.
Yes, she is.